Suppose a black man who couldn't get a decent job decided to support his family by making sandwiches and selling them to the men on local construction projects. First, he would have to apply in proper legal language and procedure for licenses and permissions from all of the branches and departments of government which required them. He would probably need licenses from city and state permitting him to make sales. Then he would have to be regularly inspected and certified under pure food and drug laws. If he managed to comply with all of this without going broke or giving up in despair, he would still be faced with the problem of keeping extensive records to enable the city, state, and federal tax collectors to take part of his earnings and to be sure that he paid his fair share. This would require an extensive knowledge of bookkeeping, which he probably wouldn't have. Suppose he decided to hire his brother-in-law, who knew a little bookkeeping, to keep his records. Then he'd have to comply with all the laws which harass other employers, including income tax and Social Security deductions from his employees' earnings, sales tax, minimum wage laws, and working condition standards. With such powerful barriers to success, no wonder the poor get poorer. Not only does government regulation prevent enterprising individuals from getting into business for themselves, it also helps freeze many individuals into an 8-to-5 grind unnecessarily. There are a large and increasing number of jobs in our automated world which require not that a specified set of hours be put in at an office, but that a certain amount of work be accomplished, regardless of how long it takes or where it's done. As long as an employee in this kind of job gets his work done, it shouldn't matter to the company if he does it in 1 hour a day and works only in his own kitchen between the hours of 2 and 3 a.m. And yet employers, caught in the fascism of government regulation and red tape, become increasingly inflexible and insist that employees put in an 8-hour day, even if 5 of those hours are spent sitting at a desk doing nothing but trying to look busy. Without government regulation, businesses would be freer to innovate and would have to compete harder for labor due to the economic boom created by freedom. This would mean much less rigid working conditions for employees. Economic freedom is important to large businesses, but it's just as important to the ordinary man in the street, to the poor man, to the college student. In the long run, busybody regulations usually aimed at helping special interest groups harm everyone. Add to this the disaster of governmental monetary control, with its inevitable inflation, depressions, balance of payments problems, gold drains, unsound currencies, and eventual monetary breakdowns, and one begins to realize how much damage governmental meddling does to the marvelously efficient and productive mechanism of the market, and how much higher the standard of living would be if the market were free. In view of the poverty created by government's interferences with the economy, governmental anti-poverty programs would be laughable if they weren't so tragic. Any governmental interference with the market, no matter how well-meaning, distorts the market and misdirects the vital signals, which misdirection further distorts the market and prevents it from moving toward stability. Government bureaucrats' fine-tuning of the economy resembles the activities of a bunch of lunatics armed with crowbars adjusting the workings of an automated electronics plant. The unregulated market has often been accused of creating unemployment, and the poverty of the masses in England during the Industrial Revolution is cited as an example. But the market's critics fail to point out that the poor were in an even worse condition before the Industrial Revolution, when the infant mortality rate was almost 75% and periodic famines swept the land, killing off the excess population. As a free market matures into full industrialization, the productivity of workers increases due to increasing investment in capital goods, that is, the tools of production, so that workers' incomes rise. This is because the only source of prosperity is value production. Production depends on tools. The more and better tools with which the worker is equipped, the greater his productive capacity. Industries continually improve the tools, machines, their workers use in an effort to increase production and profits. The workers' wages then rise as industries bid against each other for labor. In a free market, wages would rise because management's increased investment in tools increased the productivity of workers. Powerful unions and costly strikes would be unnecessary, since wages would always rise to a market level, which is the highest level the employer could afford to pay. Along with the rise in wages in a market free of government strangulation, unemployment drops until there's employment for everyone who wants to work. Labor is and always has been relatively less abundant than both people's demands for goods and the natural resources necessary to fill these demands. This will hold true unless and until we reach a point of overpopulation, where the supply of labor exceeds the supply of raw materials, at which point there will be mass starvation. This means that, barring massive overpopulation, there will always be enough jobs in a well-developed free market. Unemployment in a fully developed industrial society is a sign of an unhealthy economy, weakened by government parasitism. The major cause of unemployment is government's interferences with the economy, minimum wage rates being a particular example. All of government's activities siphon money out of the market, leaving less to hire workers and pay them good wages. Having injured labor by injuring the market, government poses as the friend of labor and helps by imposing minimum wage requirements, either directly by legislation or indirectly by giving strongly preferential treatment to labor unions. Since business has only so much capital which can be allocated to wages, when wage rates are artificially set above market level, the balance must be kept by laying off the least productive workers. This creates a class of jobless poor who are supported by government welfare. It also decreases the amount of goods that can be produced, which increases their price and so lowers the standard of living for everyone. Instead of government being recognized as the culprit, automation has frequently gotten the blame. But automation can't cut down on the total number of available jobs simply because there's no limit to people's economic wants. No matter how many wants are filled by machines, there will still be an unlimited number of new wants left unfilled. Automation doesn't reduce the number of jobs, it merely rearranges the pattern of demand for labor, as, for example, from the industry which is being automated to the industry which is manufacturing the automated machinery. If automation were as dreadful as its foes assert, we would be wise to scrap all steam shovels in favor of hand shovels, or better yet, teaspoons, to be assured of full employment. The unregulated market has also been accused of the miseries of the affluent society. Poverty and unemployment are the products of government intervention, but the free market certainly is responsible for affluence. If critics object to market-provided comforts and conveniences, they are quite free to do heavy labor with crude implements from dawn to dusk, sleep on a dirt floor, and suffer a high mortality rate, so long as they don't try to impose their way of life on more sensible people. One of the reasons the bureaucrats frequently give for governmental tinkering with the economy is that if the market were left alone, it would alternate between inflation and depression or boom and bust. But just what is it that causes this dreaded business cycle? Is this instability intrinsic in the market, or is there some external cause? Suppose that a counterfeiter succeeded in flooding a small town with worthless bills. The inflow of new money would cause an artificial prosperity, a boom. Townspeople with plenty of money on their hands would invest heavily in new and speculative ventures. But as soon as the boom had run its course, it would become apparent that the economy couldn't support these new ventures. New businesses would fold, investors lose their money, unemployment skyrocket, a bust would have set in. In a business cycle, the government plays much the same role as that counterfeiter. A business cycle begins when the currency is inflated because money substitutes, paper money, coins made of low-value metal, such as the sandwich coins, etc., are pumped into the economy. These money substitutes are, in reality, substitutes for nothing, since they are not backed by real monetary value, such as gold and silver. They are, therefore, worthless, or very nearly so. It is government which issues currency and government which inflates the supply of money substitutes. The government-inflated currency stimulates an artificial boom which misdirects the market signal system. Entrepreneurs, thinking they're more prosperous than they really are, make malinvestments and overinvestments. The boom breaks when the nature and extent of the malinvestment is discovered. The ensuing depression is actually the market's only means of recovering from the inflation-caused malinvestment. Thus, the business cycle, which has been so often blamed on laissez-faire capitalism, is actually the cold steel of the knife of government intervention into the market's vitals. Free trade. In spite of the fact that the free market is completely self-regulating and that government intervention is the cause rather than the cure of market imbalance, many still fear a totally unregulated market. They contend that a free market would promote the economic exploitation of helpless individuals by powerful interest groups. It isn't enough, they feel, for individuals to be free of force and fraud. They must also be defended against the selfish predations of big business, monopolies, cartels, which are actually tentative monopolies, and the rich in general. These economic bugaboos are all similar and can all be dispelled by examining the most extreme of them, monopoly.